Know how many more hours in the day you have to take more things on.
Well, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
Sure.
The diary entry is gone. A single line struck through in the working calendar at Buckingham Palace, and the people who read royal schedules for a living stop breathing for a moment. An engagement that Anne, Princess Royal, was expected to attend has quietly vanished from the public grid. No press release, no explanation, just an empty space where the most dependable royal in Britain was supposed to stand. Across newsrooms in London, editors lean toward their screens. They have spent months watching King Charles III manage his reign through illness. They have tracked every move Prince William makes. They have studied Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her careful return to public life. They have measured Queen Camilla's growing visibility. They have replayed the wreckage of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and while every camera points at those names, the one player who never asked for a camera has just shifted on the board. That is the move nobody was watching. Here is what makes this dangerous. A scandal is loud. A scandal announces itself. But a small change in Anne's diary makes no sound at all, and that silence is exactly what should frighten the institution. The Princess Royal does not do drama. She does not give weepy interviews. She does not stage emotional farewells from a palace balcony. So when something around her goes quiet, it does not mean nothing is happening. It usually means something already has. Hi viewers, before we go any further, tell me one thing in the comments. If your country had a royal family, would you trust the loud one who loves the spotlight or the quiet one who just gets the work done? Drop your honest answer below. I read every single one, and this story is going to test that exact instinct. Because this is not a gossip story. This is a forensic look at how power actually moves inside one of the oldest institutions on Earth. According to reports circulating in the British press, Anne carries one of the heaviest engagement loads of any senior royal, year after year, often topping the list of official duties completed. Royal biographers have long debated whether the monarchy quietly built itself around her reliability without ever admitting it out loud. From a public relations standpoint, a major announcement about her royal future would not just be news about one woman. It would be a confession about how thin the working monarchy has become. Think about the math the palace has to face. Andrew is gone from public life. Prince Harry and Meghan stepped back and crossed an ocean. Charles is balancing a kingship against his health. That leaves a small core of working royals carrying a nation's worth of ceremony, charity, and symbolism. And inside that small core, one woman has been absorbing more pressure than anyone wanted to count. Now picture what happens if she steps back, even slightly. A reduced schedule, a handful of patronages handed to someone else, a short, controlled statement about focusing her commitments. In ordinary language, those words sound gentle, almost like a reward for decades of service. But in royal language, those same words land like a fault line opening under the throne room floor. Because every duty Anne lets go has to land on someone, and the people it would land on are not ready to admit how much they have been leaning on her. The narrator wants you to understand the stakes clearly. This story does not claim Anne has retired. It does not claim there is a confirmed palace announcement. What it claims is sharper and more uncomfortable. It claims that any real shift in her royal future would expose the hidden pressure points the monarchy has spent years hiding behind smiles and waves. The obvious reading is that an older royal is naturally slowing down. That reading is too small. Anne is not just a hardworking woman approaching a quieter season. She is the connection between the old monarchy of Queen Elizabeth II and the practical, unglamorous service that keeps the crown believable to ordinary people. Remove that connection, even partly, and you do not just lose a worker. You lose a piece of proof that the monarchy still earns its place. The palace knows how to manage scandal. It has crisis teams, lawyers, and decades of practice burying embarrassment. What it does not know how to manage is the slow, quiet loss of the one person it always assumed would simply keep showing up. And by the time Buckingham Palace fully understands what Anne's move means, Prince William may already be staring at a future that arrived years too early. Watch her at a hospital in a town most people could not find on a map. There are no screaming crowds. There is no designer dress that will trend by morning. There is a small line of nurses, a few patients in wheelchairs, and a woman in a practical coat who shakes every hand, asks real questions, and remembers what was said last time. Anne, Princess Royal, does this kind of visit again and again, in places the cameras forget, on days nobody marks on a calendar. That is her power, and almost nobody noticed how rare it had become. She is the anti-celebrity royal, and she built that identity on purpose. While other members of the family generate headlines through fashion, romance, or feuds, Anne generates almost nothing the tabloids can sell. She does not explain her feelings in long interviews. She does not invite documentary crews into her home to film her tears. She does not turn her duty into a performance. Her entire public image rests on three plain things: repetition, consistency, and credibility. She shows up again, and she shows up when no one is clapping. That ethic did not appear from nowhere. Royal biographers trace it straight to Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Elizabeth treated service as a vow, not a mood. Philip valued blunt usefulness over soft sentiment. Anne absorbed both. From them, she took the idea that a royal's job is not to be adored, but to be useful, that the crown is paid for in long days and aching feet, not in applause. According to reports circulating in the British press, she has long completed hundreds of official engagements a year, frequently more than royals half her age. Now sit with the uncomfortable part. In a media culture built on noise, quiet duty can look boring. It does not trend. It does not sell magazine covers. For years, the steady work Anne does was treated by the public, and even by parts of the palace, as background furniture, always there, never urgent, easy to ignore. And that is the trap. Because the things we treat as permanent are the things we never planned to replace. The palace got comfortable. Anne's reliability became the floor everyone stood on without looking down. No one drew up a serious plan for the day that floor might shift, because shifting was not in her character. She was the fixed point, the steady hand, the one royal whose name never appeared next to the word crisis. But normal is exactly what becomes dangerous when it disappears.
And I mean, the two that really stand out, Save the Children and Riding for the Disabled. You know, she has been with them for so long. I mean, there is nobody within the Save the Children orbit who knows that organisation as well as she does, and they're incredibly grateful for all that she's done over the years.
From a public relations standpoint, the monarchy has spent a generation selling glamour while quietly running on grit. Catherine brings beauty and warmth. William brings the promise of the future. Camilla brings the steadiness of endurance. Yet none of that replaces the unglamorous arithmetic of a diary packed with hospitals, regiments, charities, and small communities that will never make the evening news. Glamour fills a front page, Anne fills a schedule. Those are not the same job, and the palace is about to learn how different they truly are. Here is the question that should keep the institution awake. What happens when the family's most popular faces are asked to do the work that was never about popularity in the first place? Because the next move is not about whether Anne is loved. Loved royals are easy to find. The hard truth is colder than that. Popularity cannot replace work. A handshake that means something cannot be faked by a camera smile. And when the institution finally needs that quiet credibility to step forward, it may discover that the one person who carried it has decided, after decades, that she has carried enough. 2 clocks are running inside Buckingham Palace, and they are not telling the same time. The first clock is legal. It says King Charles III is the monarch, crowned and confirmed, and that Prince William, Prince of Wales, is the heir who waits. That clock moves slowly, by law and ceremony, by oaths and ancient rules. The second clock is quieter and far more honest. It does not wait for a coronation. It moves every time a duty, a decision, or a public expectation slides toward the heir before the crown ever does. And right now, that second clock is speeding up. The narrator calls these two forces by name: legal succession and operational succession. Legal succession is the version everyone understands. A monarch dies or steps down, and the next in line takes the throne in a televised ritual the whole world watches. Operational succession is the version almost no one talks about. It happens in the dark, in reshuffled schedules and reassigned patronages, when the real work of being royal begins migrating toward William long before any throne changes hands. One is a headline, the other is a quiet transfer of weight, and the quiet one is where the danger lives. Charles knows this, so does his son. The king is managing a reign while managing his health, and every public absence forces the same private question: who carries the load today? William, meanwhile, has made no secret of the monarchy he wants. He wants it smaller, leaner, modern, fewer working royals, less expense, a tighter circle that fits a skeptical century. On paper, that vision sounds smart, it sounds responsible, but a leaner monarchy has a fatal weakness hiding inside it, and Anne, Princess Royal, sits right on top of that weakness. Here is the problem nobody at the palace wants to say out loud. If you cut the monarchy down to a handful of glamorous faces, you also cut the people who do the unglamorous work that gives the crown its legitimacy. And Anne is the single largest source of that unglamorous work. So the moment her future comes into question, the palace is forced to answer a set of brutal, practical questions it has been dodging for years. Who takes over her hundreds of charities? Who inherits the regiments, the rural visits, the small organizations that depend on a royal name? Who becomes the royal who simply shows up without turning every handshake into a publicity event? Royal biographers have long debated whether the modern, slimmed-down monarchy can survive the very efficiency it brags about. From a public relations standpoint, a lean crown looks responsible to taxpayers, but operationally, it is a tightrope walk with no safety net. Cut too little, and critics call you bloated and outdated. Cut too deep, and you slice into the workers who make the institution mean something to ordinary people. There is no comfortable middle, and Anne's future drags that impossible choice into the light. This is why her position matters far beyond her own life. Anne's possible step back is not just a personal milestone, it is a stress test. It forces William to confront the gap between the monarchy he imagines and the monarchy that actually functions. He can sketch a leaner crown on paper all he likes, but paper does not visit a hospice. Paper does not hand out medals to a regiment. Paper does not sit with carers in a forgotten town and make them feel seen. Someone real has to do that, and the supply of someone real is running thin. So picture the heir, staring at a diary that suddenly has holes in it. Every engagement Anne releases is a small demand placed directly at William's feet. Take it on, and the lean monarchy he promised starts to swell again. Refuse it, and a cause, a charity, a community loses the royal attention it relied on. Either choice costs him something. Either choice exposes a crack in the plan. And he is being forced to make those choices while his father's reign is still finding its footing. One royal's reduced workload could become William's first real test of leadership, long before he ever feels the weight of a crown on his own head. And the man who runs the most dangerous risk of all may be the one piece on this board no one has dared to mention yet. The seating chart tells you everything if you know how to read it. At the grand state occasions, the eye is trained to follow King Charles III and then to drift toward Queen Camilla at his side. The cameras find her. The commentators note her gown, her place, her proximity to the king. And in royal life, proximity reads as power. Where you sit, who you stand beside, how often the lens finds you, these are the silent signals palace watchers decode. So when Anne, Princess Royal, begins to appear less often in that frame, the balance of who looks powerful quietly tilts, and Camilla's position shifts with it. The narrator wants to be careful here, because this is where lazy storytellers reach for a villain. Camilla, Queen, is not a cartoon. She is not a schemer hiding behind a curtain. To paint her that way would be cheap and frankly untrue. Her story is one of endurance, of surviving decades of public hostility and emerging as a fixed presence at the king's side. That is its own kind of strength. So this is not a tale of conspiracy. It is a study of optics, perception, and the emotional politics that run beneath every reign. And in that study, two women represent two completely different ways to survive the monarchy. Anne survives through service. Camilla survives through endurance. Anne built her standing on a mountain of work, on showing up so reliably that her credibility became unquestionable. Camilla built hers on patience, on weathering scandal and ridicule until time and image management turned the public's hostility into acceptance. Neither path is wrong, but they are not the same, and they do not protect the institution in the same way. One earns trust through usefulness. The other holds a position through closeness to the crown, and the public, watching from the outside, often mistakes visibility for value. That confusion is exactly where the danger sits. If Anne's public work shrinks, the most photographed royals do not become more secure. They become more exposed, because the cameras that once had to share their attention with a hardworking princess now have fewer places to land. Every gap Anne leaves in the public schedule shines a brighter, harsher light on whoever remains. From a public relations standpoint, that is a quiet trap. More visibility sounds like more power. But more visibility also means more scrutiny, more comparison, more pressure to justify the attention. Royal biographers have long debated how the monarchy balances its visible figures against its working ones. Camilla offers stability beside the king, a symbol of a reign that survived its storms. But stability is not the same as the unglamorous labor that keeps the crown connected to ordinary Britain, and William's future authority depends on that connection holding. If the workhorse steps back while the symbols step forward, the institution risks looking top-heavy, all crown, and no foundation. Here is the uncomfortable balance the palace must manage. The crown can survive gossip. It has buried 1,000 rumors and outlasted 100 scandals. What it cannot easily survive is the loss of a stabilizing presence, a person whose steady work held the whole structure level without anyone noticing the load. Camilla stabilizes the king's image and stabilizes the monarchy's purpose. Remove one kind of stability, and the other suddenly has to do a job it was never built to do. So the pressure point is not in the ballroom, and it is not in the gossip columns. It is in the difference between being seen and being needed. The palace has spent years managing how things look. Now it faces something it cannot manage with optics alone, the slow exposure of how much the institution depended on a single quiet woman to make the whole performance believable. And the moment that dependence becomes visible, every other player on the board is forced to account for their own worth. But before the board can reckon with who serves and who is served, it has to confront the one piece whose fall already rewrote every rule. The damaged king's son, whose disgrace still hangs over every royal name. The shadow no one in the family can fully escape. The titles came off in a single afternoon, and the whole monarchy felt the cold. His Royal Highness, the military appointments, the royal patronages, stripped one after another, until the man the world once knew as Prince Andrew, Duke of York, was reduced to a plainer, heavier name. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
The Princess Royal, because she is absolutely unimpeachable and does an incredible job working really hard for this country.
And never been even a whiff of controversy about her, unlike the king with his lobbying and his fundraising. And
well, I remember when she was a young girl, and she was quite lively, shall we put it that way.
There was no balcony moment, no fond farewell, no decades of service to celebrate. There was only the quiet, brutal arithmetic of an institution cutting away a limb to save the body. And in that moment, every other royal's value was silently recalculated. The narrator must be exact here, because this is dangerous ground. Andrew has consistently denied the allegations made against him. He has never been found guilty in a criminal court. What follows is not a verdict on his guilt. It is an analysis of damage, of reputation, of how a single fallen figure changed the weight every remaining royal must carry. According to reports widely circulated in the press, his association with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre created a reputational wound the monarchy decided it could not absorb. A reported out-of-court settlement with figures discussed in the millions closed the legal chapter, but never the public one, because the public does not forget the way courts do. The settlement may have ended a lawsuit, but it could not end the comparison that now follows every member of the family. And that comparison is the real story.
What was the regiment that he handed over today, Michael?
It's the Army Air Corps, a very important bunch of people. And of course, the interesting thing here is last week, the King definitely gave Prince Harry, his younger son, a flea in the ear. And today...
Set Andrew beside Anne, and you see two royals who were given the same raw material, the same blood, the same titles, the same access, the same privilege, and watch what each one built with it. One built a monument to entitlement, the other built a record of duty. One became the liability the institution had to amputate, the other became living proof that the monarchy still contained people who understood why it exists. That contrast is not gentle, it is a knife. Andrew represents the danger of privilege without purpose, the royal who took everything the institution offered and gave the public a scandal in return. Anne represents the burden of duty, the royal who took the same offer and answered it with decades of unglamorous work. For years, the family could hide that contrast inside the general blur of royal life. Andrew's fall ripped the blur away. Suddenly, the difference between a royal who serves and a royal who is served was not an abstract idea. It was a face. It was a name. It was a headline that would not die. From a public relations standpoint, this is the moral problem that now haunts every palace decision. The public has been handed a single, merciless question, and they apply it to everyone. Does this person serve the institution, or does the institution serve them? Once that question is loose in the culture, no royal escapes it. Every appearance, every absence, every privilege is now measured against it. And under that pitiless standard, Andrew's disgrace did something the palace never intended. It made Anne's quiet value impossible to ignore. Think about the strange arithmetic of it.
She didn't think a slimmed-down monarchy was a good idea.
When the monarchy removed Andrew from the board, it did not simply lose one piece. It changed the weight on every piece that remained. The work he might have done, the engagements, the patronages, the appearances, did not disappear. It had to be redistributed. And in a family already stretched thin by departures and illness, that redistribution fell hardest on the few who actually carry weight. Anne, more than anyone, absorbed pressure that the institution never publicly acknowledged. Royal biographers have long debated how close the monarchy came to genuine crisis in those years. What is harder to debate is the lesson buried in the wreckage. Scandal does not only damage the person it destroys, It quietly raises the value of everyone who never made the headlines for the wrong reasons. Andrew's fall did not just stain his own name, it exposed how much the institution had come to rely on the discipline of the few royals who never gave it cause for shame. So here is the cold truth the palace now has to face. When scandal removes one royal from the board, the remaining pieces must carry more. And the piece carrying the most year after year, in silence, without complaint, without applause, may be carrying far more than anyone has ever admitted. Andrew's shadow did not just fall over his own ruined name. It stretched across the entire family and landed, heaviest of all, on the shoulders of the one woman everyone assumed would simply keep holding everything up. The book lands on the desk with a soft thud, and inside it are more than 200 names. Not jewels, not crowns, not tiaras locked in a vault. The most powerful object in this story is a diary, a thick working calendar filled with towns, hospitals, regiments, charities, and small organizations scattered across Britain and beyond. Each line is a promise. Each name is a community that learned to count on a single royal showing up. And someone somewhere inside the palace machinery now has to decide what happens to every one of those promises if Anne, Princess Royal, steps back. This is where the story stops being about glamour and starts being about plumbing. Patronages are not decorations. People hear the word and picture a ribbon cutting, a smiling photo, a name on a letterhead. The reality is far more practical. According to reports circulating in the British press, Anne has held links to hundreds of organizations, far more than most senior royals carry. For many of those groups, a royal patron is not a luxury, it is oxygen. The royal name brings press coverage, opens donor wallets, and lifts a small charity out of obscurity for one shining day a year. So picture the quiet panic that a single change would trigger. If Anne narrows her role, the palace faces three hard options, and none of them is clean. It can transfer her patronages to other royals, loading more weight onto an already thin team. It can reduce royal involvement, leaving organizations to fend for themselves. Or it can let certain causes quietly lose the high-level attention that kept them alive in the public eye. Royal biographers have long debated whether the slimmed-down monarchy even has enough hands to catch what Anne might let fall. Here is the part that should give you chills. The monarchy's real value is not measured in coronations and golden carriages. Those are the spectacle. The actual value lives in the small visits, the unglamorous stops that make forgotten communities feel that someone at the very top still sees them. A regiment in a remote county, a hospice few have heard of, a carers group that meets in a borrowed hall. Anne gave those places something money cannot buy. She gave them recognition, and recognition, once withdrawn, leaves a wound that no press release can heal. From a public relations standpoint, a single patronage transfer looks like nothing, a line item, an administrative tidy-up. But watch what happens when you stack them. One transfer is paperwork. 10 transfers are a pattern. 100 transfers become something else entirely. A map. A map of where the work is going, who is receiving it, and who is quietly being prepared to carry the future of the monarchy. Read that map closely, and you can trace the real lines of succession long before any official ever says the word. The diary, that plain and unremarkable book, becomes the most honest document in the palace. And that is the twist hiding in plain sight. The major announcement everyone is waiting for may never be spoken aloud. There may be no statement from a balcony, no televised address, no dramatic confirmation. The real announcement could be buried inside a reshuffled list of patronages, released without fanfare on an ordinary Tuesday, dressed up as routine administration. The institution that survives by controlling language could deliver its biggest message by saying almost nothing at all. But a reshuffled list raises a question the palace cannot dodge. If the work has to go somewhere, then who exactly is ready to receive decades of trust that cannot simply be handed over like a folder of paperwork? The board just got wider, and suddenly there are more players than chairs. Step back from the single piece and look at the whole field. Catherine, Princess of Wales. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh. Prince William, Prince of Wales. These are the names meant to carry the monarchy into its next era. The working royals who must somehow absorb whatever Anne, Princess Royal, sets down. On paper, the math looks solvable. In reality, it is far more complicated because the thing Anne carries cannot be measured in a spreadsheet. Consider Catherine first, because her position is the most delicate of all. The Princess of Wales holds enormous symbolic power. When she appears, the world watches. Her warmth, her image, her connection to the public give the monarchy a face for the future. But that power is fragile and must be spent carefully. Following her own health challenges and her measured return to public life, The palace cannot simply pile Anne's heavy workload onto her shoulders. Royal biographers have long debated whether Catherine's true value lies in doing more engagements or in protecting the symbolic weight she already carries. Burn her out on routine visits, and you waste the very thing that makes her irreplaceable. Then there are Sophie and Edward, the steady, underrated pair. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh have quietly become two of the most reliable working royals in the family. They show up, they take on causes, they have earned real respect without demanding headlines. In many ways, they are the closest the family has to Anne's model of quiet service. But here is the limit, and it is a hard one. Even Sophie and Edward, dependable as they are, cannot simply absorb everything Anne represents. There are only so many hours, only so many bodies, only so many places one royal can stand in a single day. This is the wall the institution keeps slamming into. The younger and middle generation can inherit titles. They can inherit causes. They can inherit visibility, the cameras, the coverage, the public attention. What they cannot inherit, not instantly, not by decree, is the one thing that took Anne a lifetime to build. Trust. Decades of it. The kind of credibility that comes only from showing up thousands of times, in good weather and bad, when it mattered and when no one was watching. From a public relations standpoint, that trust is the monarchy's most precious asset, and it is the one asset that refuses to transfer on command. Think about what that really means. The palace can write a name on a patronage. It can announce that a new royal will take over a charity, a regiment, a cause. That part is easy. It is paperwork and a press photo. But the organization receiving the new patron does not automatically feel the same confidence it felt with Anne. The carers do not instantly trust a new face the way they trusted the woman who came year after year. Credibility is earned in person, slowly, and it cannot be poured from one royal into another like water between glasses. So the handover, if it comes, will be watched far more closely than the palace might hope. The public will not simply note who receives Anne's work. They will judge it. They will ask whether the new patron truly cares or merely showed up for the photograph. They will compare every successor against the standard Anne set, and that standard is brutally high. In a culture already asking whether each royal serves the institution or is served by it, the transfer of Anne's duties becomes a public exam, graded in real time, with no chance to retake it. The institution can assign duties on paper, but credibility does not move that easily, and the people watching know the difference. And just when the board seems fully mapped, with every British player accounted for, the game expands again, far past the palace walls, far past Britain itself, to a pressure point waiting offshore that almost no one saw coming. The phone rings in an office thousands of miles from London, and the voice on the line is worried. Not a banker, not a lawyer. The head of an overseas charity, one of the many international organizations that learned to lean on a single royal name. Word has reached them that Anne, Princess Royal, may be narrowing her role, and the question landing on desks far beyond Britain is sharp and immediate. What happens to us? Because the monarchy's reach was never confined to British soil, and the offshore truth of this story has nothing to do with hidden bank accounts. Let the narrator be clear, because this is where cheap stories go wrong. There is no secret offshore fortune here, no fake criminal account, no invented financial scandal hidden in a tax haven. To fabricate that would be a lie, and this is forensic analysis, not fiction. The real offshore plot twist is something far more interesting and entirely true. It is the international machinery of the monarchy itself, the Commonwealth work, the overseas charities, the global reputation, the quiet diplomatic soft power that travels far beyond Buckingham Palace and shapes how the world sees the crown. Reframe the word offshore, and the whole story expands. Offshore is not a vault. It is a pressure point that sits outside the palace walls, beyond Britain's borders, in the dozens of nations and organizations that connect to the monarchy through service rather than law. Anne has long been one of the Crown's most active figures in this space. According to reports circulating in the British press, her Commonwealth-linked engagements, her international charity work, and her patronage of globally connected organizations made her a genuine instrument of British soft power. When she traveled, she carried more than her name. She carried the idea that the monarchy still meant something abroad. Now follow the consequence, because this is where it gets serious. If Anne's role changes, the effect does not stop at the English Channel. It ripples across the globe. The monarchy's image overseas does not rest on coronations and state banquets alone. Those are the postcards. The real foundation is built on reliable royals doing serious, unglamorous work far from the cameras, in places where British influence is felt but rarely filmed. Royal biographers have long debated how much of the Crown's international standing rests on this quiet labor, and how exposed it becomes when a key figure steps away. Think especially about the American audience watching all of this unfold. From a public relations standpoint, the United States views British royalty through a powerful mix of drama, tradition, scandal, and admiration for public service. Americans devour the spectacle, but they also respect the work. They notice which royals actually serve. And the international organizations that quietly relied on Anne's name understand a hard truth that the casual viewer might miss. A royal patron is a magnet for global attention and funding, and when that magnet weakens, the pull on donors, on partners, on worldwide goodwill weakens with it. Here is the reaction that should reshape how you see this entire story. The most important response to Anne's changing future may not come from Buckingham Palace at all. It may come from the charities, the Commonwealth bodies, and the overseas organizations that built part of their identity around her involvement. Their worry is not about gossip or headlines. It is about losing a connection to the crown that brought them visibility they could never generate alone. The palace can manage the British press. It cannot so easily manage the quiet disappointment of 100 organizations scattered across the globe. And once the board expands beyond Britain, the entire picture changes. Anne stops looking like a side piece, a senior royal naturally slowing down. She starts looking like something far larger, one of the monarchy's last genuine global stabilizers, a figure whose quiet work held together pieces of the crown's reputation that most people never even knew were connected. The question is no longer whether Britain can replace her at home. The question is whether the monarchy can hold its standing in the world without the one royal who carried so much of it offshore, unseen, and unthanked. So when the announcement finally comes, in whatever careful form it takes, the real test will not be the words, it will be everything the words are trying not to say. The statement is short. That is the first warning sign. It arrives without drama, a few measured sentences released through official channels, and it does not contain the word retire. It does not say leaving. Instead, it speaks of focus, of selected commitments, of a deep tribute to decades of devoted service. To the casual reader, it sounds warm, almost like a celebration. But the people who decode royal language for a living read it twice, then go very quiet. Because in the Palace Dictionary, gentle words are how the institution announces an earthquake. This is the moment the whole story has been building toward. The narrator stresses one more time that this is analysis and not confirmed fact. There is no claim here that Anne, Princess Royal, has made such an announcement or set such a date. The point is sharper than any single statement. It is that Anne would never need to say, "I am stepping down," for the palace to feel the ground shift beneath it. In royal communication, the loudest messages are often the quietest ones. A phrase like, "focusing on selected commitments," can carry the weight of 1,000 headlines while pretending to carry none. Understand how the machine works, and the genius of it becomes clear. The monarchy survives by controlling language. Every word in an official statement is chosen, weighed, and polished to soften, to reassure, to manage the public's emotions. Royal biographers have long debated whether this careful language conceals more than it reveals. From a public relations standpoint, the strategy is brilliant. Say less, and you control more. Wrap a major shift in the soft cloth of gratitude, and the public hears a thank you, while the institution hears a countdown. That is the cruel split at the heart of this chapter. When such a statement lands, two audiences hear two completely different things. The public hears warmth. They hear a nation thanking a hardworking princess for a lifetime of duty, and they feel a gentle glow of appreciation. But inside the palace walls, the same words land like a starting gun. Every department that quietly depended on Anne now knows the clock has started. The patronages must move. The diary must be redistributed. The future everyone postponed has just become the present. And here is the part that should unsettle you most. By the time any such statement is released to the public, the real decision has almost certainly already been made, behind closed doors, in private meetings, in conversations that cameras never reach. The announcement is not the moment of change. It is the moment the change becomes visible, the carefully managed reveal of a decision that was settled long before. The public experiences it as breaking news. The institution experiences it as old news, finally made official. So the controlled language, designed to soften the blow, ends up revealing exactly what it tries to hide. The very effort to make the moment sound small is what tells the careful listener how big it truly is. When an institution this practiced at silence chooses its words this carefully, the carefulness itself is the confession. The public may hear gratitude, but beneath that gratitude runs a countdown that started ticking in private long ago and now cannot be stopped, which leaves only one question standing. When the board finally settles and the quiet peace has made her move, what is left of the monarchy that leaned on her for so long? The board is still. Every piece has moved, and now the picture is finally clear. This is the moment to step back and see what the whole game was really about. Because Anne's future was never just a royal gossip topic, never just a headline to scroll past. It was a lesson, written in the language of one of the oldest institutions on earth, about family, duty, and the quiet danger of leaning too hard on the one person who never complains. The story was never only about a princess. It was about what any institution owes the people who hold it up. Look at where the pieces stand now. King Charles III remains the monarch, steering his reign through the weight of the crown and the limits of his health. Prince William, Prince of Wales, is the future, the heir whose leaner vision of monarchy will soon be tested against reality. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stands at the center of the next public image, her symbolic power carefully guarded. Queen Camilla remains a stabilizing presence beside the king. Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, anchor the working structure with quiet reliability. And Andrew Mountbatten Windsor remains what he became, a permanent warning about privilege without purpose. But Anne, Princess Royal, is the piece that proves the deepest truth of all. She proves that power in any institution is not always loud. It is not always the face on the magazine cover or the name in the scandal. Sometimes the most important player is the one nobody photographs, the one whose value stays invisible right up until the moment it is gone. Royal biographers have long debated who truly held the modern monarchy together through its hardest years. The answer, this story argues, was often standing quietly at a hospital door in a town no camera bothered to find. Here is the final lesson, and it reaches far beyond any palace. The monarchy's next chapter will not be judged only by crowns, carriages, balcony appearances, or grand titles. Those are the easy parts, the spectacle anyone can stage. It will be judged by something harder. It will be judged by whether the next generation can carry real service without draining the very people who made that service believable in the first place. Every institution, every family, every team faces the same test. The quiet ones who carry the weight are not infinite. Use them up, and you lose the thing that made you trustworthy. So the real shock was never going to be a dramatic farewell. Anne's greatest shock may not be that she changes her royal future at all. It may be something far more profound. It may be that, after all these decades of silent, uncomplaining work, she finally forces Buckingham Palace to admit a truth it spent years avoiding: how much of the monarchy's future was standing quietly on her shoulders the whole time. The piece nobody watched turns out to have been holding up the board, and that is the move that changes everything. If this story moved you, if it made you see the quiet workers in your own life a little differently, then this channel is exactly where you belong. Subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story, the kind of story that inspires you, challenges you, and reminds you that the strongest people are often the ones who never ask for the spotlight. Tap that bell because the next chapter of royal power is already taking shape, and you will want to be here when it breaks. Now the narrator turns the board over to you. Who, in your own world, is the quiet one holding everything up, the person whose value you only truly see when you imagine them gone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell their story. Your words might be the very thing that inspires another viewer to thank the quiet hero in their own life before it is too late.